Good morning! Welcome to Urban Yoke. My name is Julia, and in this video I want to take you on a little journey and show you the new addition in our garden. So, Charles, his uncle, my dad, Sam, and a few other helpers, we got together and put in a braai area with an extended table and a little 2-gas burner on the other side. So it's a little entertainment area that was built with reclaimed materials, and a lot of them were actually reclaimed from this property itself. So yes, I'm very excited. Oh yeah, for those of you who don't know, a braai is essentially a barbecue. It's the South African version of a barbecue. So there are a few little bits about it that's quite special. That were little additions as we went on. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's have a look at our upcycled or recycled entertainment area in the garden. Okay, so the braai thing was on the minds of many for a while, and it eventually came out that we will be building the braai here in our garden. And at the time, I must admit, I wasn't particularly happy because I was not looking forward to having a mini building project in the garden for right now. You know, I was just not in a good space to deal with it at the time, but I will say this, I am ridiculously happy with it. I think it looks really awesome, and I am glad that I hardly did anything, but I'm glad that they did it and that it's there. It's a great little entertainment area. I feel really comfortable with it, and again, it's just adding to that feeling of being home. So we started with collecting the rocks. The idea was to build 2 pillars that would be filled with rocks as the main sort of support. The reason for this is that we were able to get offcuts from today's video's little sponsor, and that is RSC, Reinforcing Steel Contractors here in South Africa. They are specialists in rebar, and I will talk to you a little bit about them later on in the video. And yes, they were able to give us these offcuts of welded mesh that we used to create the pillars that we were going to fill with rocks. And so the first thing we decided to do while we were waiting for the mesh to arrive was collect some rocks. In the area that we live in, it's a very rocky, clay kind of soil. In fact, they have many brick factories and clay quarries in the area. We actually live in between a factory and a quarry, which is surprisingly not as noisy as some other places. It's interesting, but it's 24/7, they don't stop. And so we went around the property and we collected rocks that were not being used as a home by anything, so that's also important, well, anything that we noticed. So yeah, went ahead and collected rocks with the wheelbarrow, and it took a lot more wheelbarrows than we were expecting, but I imagine that's always the case with these kinds of builds. So yeah, then we went ahead and collected all of these rocks. My dad helped me, Sam helped. It was actually quite a bit of fun. The cats went about sniffing the rocks because they had to check that they were all proper. Yeah. And then my dad had an extra or an old braai that we were able to refurbish and reuse, while there were a few other bits and bobs on the actual property that we were able to use to create the support in the center for the table part. Yeah, so I'm very excited about that. Essentially, all we actually bought was some welding rods, a few screws, and maybe that was it. I think that might have actually been it because we had everything else. So let's start at the beginning, eh? We started collecting the rocks, and while we were busy collecting the rocks, the welded mesh arrived and they had to get it bent into place for the actual welding. So they went ahead and did that. That was Charles, his uncle and Sam. They dug into it, which I'm quite grateful for. Then it was time for Charles to try his hand at welding for the first time. I thought that was quite exciting, and yeah, I felt quite a bit of pride actually watching him do that. I know it's probably a silly thing, but every time each of us learns something new, it makes me feel quite proud that we have another skill that we can add to our little list and something that we can work on. So Charles tried his hand at welding. I didn't quite have the guts to do it this time, but next time I will do it. I'll get myself to do it. Yes. So once they had welded, it was time to get the stands, or welding stands, into place, so we could then fill them up with the rocks and proceed with the rest of the build. Once we had completed the one side and filled it up with rocks, it looked really cool, but we also realized that we need more rocks. So there was a time where we had to go and collect more rocks. It seemed like it was never ending. Just a quick note on that. One of the reasons we decided on rocks was because it's aesthetic that is quite common in South Africa, but it's also one that fits quite nicely on this property. The stable, the cottage that we live in, the carport, everything is built out of the rocks that were found on this property. So we wanted to keep the same aesthetic. So aside from being a functional side, it also had a way of fitting into the property really well, so it doesn't look like it was just randomly placed there. Yes, so while we collected the second set of rocks, Charles went ahead and continued with the next side and welded that side. Then we got into the rest of it, so how to get the braai part in, how to fit that in well. Once the extra braai got here, it actually took some unpacking of the rocks and then repacking to fit the braai in nicely in such a way that it can be removed should it need to be cleaned. So I will actually show you that in a few seconds. So now at this point, the, I guess you could say, tedious part has been done. all the rocks unpacked and repacked and whatnot to get the braai to fit in, or the barbecue, and it fits in really well. I'm actually quite happy with it. Yeah, as you saw, it's really easy to remove if it needs to be cleaned. It's a nice height to work with. I'm very happy with it. I know it's not very big, but there is just only 3 people living here, and I can't imagine us entertaining so many that we would actually need an extra braai for entertainment. But yes, another aspect of it is actually the potjie pot stand. So my dad's braai that he had that we could repurpose had a little stand for a potjie pot. And those of you who don't know what a potjie pot is, it's a South African way of saying a slightly small cauldron. Reason being is that there is actually a dish called potjiekos that is made here in South Africa. It is most similarly to a stew, I guess you could say, but it's not quite a stew. It has a different cooking method, a different consistency. It's quite a different experience. If you ever get the opportunity to try it out, I would suggest doing that. The pot itself is cast iron, and you cook this type of dish over a fire, and that's why you get a little hook for it, that the pot can actually sit over the fire and you can cook. It's quite nice. So yes, we didn't get a traditional potjie pot, which really looks like a cauldron with the little legs and everything. We actually just have a nice cast iron pot, but it will work none the same for what we want to do. Reason being that we got that one is so we can have a dual purpose pot for things like bread, because potbread or pot bread, if I can put it specifically, is quite common in South Africa as well. We like to cook things over a fire, and the more things we can cook over a fire, probably the better. It's a big part of our entertainment, socializing, and just generally sticking together and connecting with the community. So now that the pillars are done and the braai had been put in, or that's all the sassel up there. So yes, braai had been put in, we had the two stands. Now it was time to actually connect the two with a little table. Here we were thinking that we might actually have to buy some materials because there wasn't exactly enough of one of the same type of wood in order to get a proper, like a table, a nice deck. But fate was much happier that day than we were. Our friend and neighbor happened to have reclaimed decking wood, and he was willing to part with some so that we could have a bit extra to actually finish off this project. That was really awesome, which meant we didn't have to actually go and buy wood. Here in South Africa, at least in this region, wood is quite expensive. That's why you'll often find things out of stone or steel. Wood is a bit of a luxury, and yeah, it was actually really awesome. We got to, sanding and refurbishing, and then putting it in. It was very, very cool. They happened to actually be the right length for what we needed, so there was very little cutting needed, there was very little readjusting required. They had to be refurbished and then put up. So Charles and my dad said to getting them sanded and coated with linseed oil, then some beeswax and beeswax linseed oil mix that will help protect the wood while it's here outside. And yes, it is decking wood, but it had been previously painted, so after the sanding it needed to get a little bit of more treating. This area is also rife with termites, the sun kills everything, and yeah, the rain, you know how it goes. So that was the next part of the project. That actually took quite a while, it took a bit long, but it always does. These tedious things, the refurbishing part of things does often take long. It's the assembly that's the fun part and also not exactly the harder part in these kinds of builds. Obviously, it's not always the case. So yes, Shaw was able to find the part in the middle, so the center brace for the actual table. He was able to find that here as well, so we could refurbish, or he could refurbish it. It was very exciting. So what he did first is take that metal piece, which used to be for, I think it used to be for a stand for a sprinkler or something like that, I'm not sure. He turned it inside out, so it was like a little tree, and we were able to put the boards on top of that as the center support. So what we did first is knock that into the ground, and then we got to spray painting everything with a heat-resistant matte black spray. One, it will help it being next to or near the fire, and two, it also helps protect it from a bit of rust, and three, everything will then match and look good together rather than just these random rusted pieces. So that was part of the refurbishing aspect, and once it was done, then it's all locked in the ground and the wood pieces were set in place. So the decking strips were set in place for the actual table. Once that was done, it started really looking like something awesome, something I was happy to have in the garden, and something that made me feel a little bit bad for not wanting to do it in the beginning. But I'm sure you can understand. I was just like, oh, another project. I was really tired at this point. But I actually didn't do very much, and the work that they did, I'm just so happy with. But it didn't stop there. It actually just gets better and better. So the plan was to actually just have the braai, and the braai happens to have the pointy stand. So it was a braai with a pointy stand, and we have the table, and it's really pretty. But what else could we do? What else did we have? We have an umbrella, and you know, why not put it up? It's a very sunny place that we live in. So Shaw got to doing that. He drilled a hole through the table and put in a nice support for the umbrella. So now we've got an umbrella there as well. When people come over, we can open it up and actually sit in the shade and enjoy the summertime, enjoy the outside here. I love it, I love it. And it stayed like that for a little while and we just enjoyed it. But then a few more changes came. Okay, so about our sponsor RSC, or Reinforcing Steel Contractors. Well, what's in a name? That's exactly what they do. It's reinforcing steel, otherwise known as rebar, what they specialize in. And then they have a few other products, you know, like Bartek couplers and mesh, and we actually got a few mesh offcuts from them to complete the braai build. So thank you very much, RSC, and please do go and check them out if you have any home or DIY projects or DIY builds that you are busy doing. I'll leave a link down in the description. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed coming on this little journey with me today. And yes, I hope that you are as happy with the results. Um, yes, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you like or what you would have added. Yes, I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say. Personally, I'm very happy with the way that it is at the moment. I don't want to make any changes, but I'm sure that will come. Yes, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.